rerunner of all series, I think.
Yeah.
We never said, but I asked Sherwood Schwartz, the writer, and he said if we ever going to use it, it would have been Willie Gilligan.
Bob Denver will always be remembered as the lovable and bumbling Gilligan from Gilligan's Island, and before that, as the beatnik Maynard G. Krebs on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. While audiences knew him as a sitcom icon, off-screen he was a private man devoted to his family. Across 4 marriages, Bob had 4 children: Patrick, Megan, Emily, and Colin. Some chose to live quietly away from the spotlight, while one child's special needs would profoundly shape the second half of his life. Today we take a closer look and ask, whatever happened to Bob Denver's kids? Bob Denver was born on January 9, 1935, in New Rochelle, New York, but grew up in Brownwood, Texas. His parents, Arthur and Marion Denver, raised him in a modest home, far removed from the Hollywood spotlight. As a boy, Bob was quiet, thoughtful, and a little shy. He discovered early on that he had a sense of humor and a natural knack for making people laugh. After high school, he attended Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, where he studied political science. His first plan was not acting at all. He trained to become a teacher. In fact, he taught math and history at Corpus Christi School in Pacific Palisades, California. But his life took a sharp turn when he began acting in college plays. Friends encouraged him to audition, and he quickly found that performing gave him confidence and joy. That spark eventually pushed him to leave the classroom and pursue acting full-time. His first big break came in 1959 when he landed the role of Maynard G. Krebs, the goofy beatnik sidekick on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. The show ran for 4 years, making Bob a recognizable face in American households and setting the stage for his most iconic role a few years later, Gilligan. By the early 1960s, Bob Denver had already carved out a place in American television with his role as Maynard G. Krebs on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. His portrayal of the quirky, beatnik sidekick was both silly and endearing, and it made him instantly recognizable. Bob later admitted that Maynard gave him his first taste of fame and showed him how much audiences loved his style of comedy. But the role that would define his career came in 1964, when he was cast as Gilligan in Gilligan's Island. The sitcom, created by Sherwood Schwartz, followed 7 castaways stranded on a deserted island, with Gilligan's clumsy mistakes always ruining their chances of escape. Bob's physical comedy, goofy expressions, and childlike charm turned Gilligan into a character audiences adored. Although Gilligan's Island only aired for 3 seasons, 1964 to 1967, it became one of the most syndicated shows in TV history. Through endless reruns, generations of viewers grew up with Gilligan and his fellow castaways. Bob once joked, "It's the show that will not die," acknowledging both its staying power and how it overshadowed much of his other work. While some actors resented being typecast, Bob took it in stride. "If it weren't for Gilligan, nobody would know who I am." And if you are into classic Hollywood icons, amazing stories, and newly discovered insights, then hit that subscribe button. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers, and your support will mean a lot to our channel, he said in interviews, embracing the character that made him a household name. Though he did take other roles in stage plays, guest appearances, and reunion specials, Gilligan remained the role people remembered. In later years, Bob reprised the character for animated series like Gilligan's Planet and for reunion TV movies. He often appeared at fan conventions where he was greeted with affection. When asked how he felt about being remembered only as Gilligan, Bob would smile and say, "I can't be bitter. Gilligan gave me a career. It gave me friends, and it gave me fans. That's a gift." Away from the television cameras, Bob Denver's life was defined by his role as a husband and father. He married 4 times, and from those marriages came 4 children: Patrick, Megan, Emily, and Colin. His first marriage, to Maggie Ryan in 1960, brought his eldest son, Patrick Denver. A few years later, after marrying Jean Weber, he welcomed a daughter, Megan. His third marriage, to Carol Abrahams in the early 1970s, gave him another daughter, Emily. While all three of his older children grew up far from Hollywood and chose private lives outside the entertainment business, Bob's protective nature as a father was evident. Very little about Patrick, Megan, or Emily ever appeared in the press, a reflection of Bob's determination to shield them from the spotlight. His final and longest marriage was to Dreama Perry Denver, beginning in 1979 and lasting until his death in 2005. Together they had a son, Colin, whose life would profoundly shape Bob's later years. Born with severe disabilities, including autism, Colin required constant care and attention. Bob and Dreama's world revolved around him. Dreama later shared, "Bob was so dedicated as a father. He didn't care about Hollywood anymore. His focus was Colin and our family." Their devotion to their son led them to create the Denver Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to supporting families raising children with special needs. For fans, Bob Denver would always be Gilligan, the lovable castaway. But for his children, and especially for Colin, he was simply Dad, a man whose most important role wasn't on television, but at home. As Dreama said after his passing, he loved being Gilligan, but he loved being Dad even more. Bob Denver's eldest son, Patrick R. Denver, was born in Los Angeles in 1960. As a child, he had a playful cameo on his father's sitcom when he appeared as a miniature Gilligan in a dream sequence retelling of Jack and the Beanstalk. Since television at the time couldn't shrink Bob on screen, young Patrick was used to make the skipper appear like a giant in the chase scenes. Patrick later found his calling behind the camera rather than in front of it. Using the professional name Pat Denver, he built a career in Hollywood's visual effects industry. He became a model maker, a puppeteer, and a creator of special props, the invisible magic that makes movies come alive. His work can be seen in films like Mortal Kombat, Titanic, The X-Files, Star Trek Insurrection, Bicentennial Man, The Sum of All Fears, Tremors 4, and even the outrageous Sharktopus vs. Whale Wolf. Though he never sought fame, he earned respect among his peers. As one colleague once said, without model builders and effects artists, the movies would lose their magic. Patrick is the older brother of Megan Denver, who was born in Los Angeles, California, on June 26, 1963. Unlike Patrick, Megan stepped into acting, though only occasionally. She appeared as a child actress in The Hired Hand, alongside Peter Fonda in the early 70s, and decades later returned to the screen in The Cake Eaters in 2007. Her acting career was brief, and like her siblings, she lived most of her life away from the spotlight, choosing privacy over celebrity. Bob's third child, Emily Denver, also embraced a quiet life. While little is known publicly about her, family friends have described her as kind and artistic. Bob respected her decision to avoid Hollywood, once saying proudly, "My girls are smart and strong. They don't need Hollywood to prove themselves." The youngest of Bob's children, Colin Denver, was born later in life from his marriage to Dreama Perry Denver. Colin was born with severe disabilities, including autism, and required constant care. Raising him shaped the second half of Bob's life. Dreama recalled, "Every decision we made, our home, our time, even Bob's work, was centered around Colin. He taught us patience, compassion, and what unconditional love really means." Even after Bob's passing in 2005, Colin remains the heart of the Denver family. Dreama continues to care for him and runs the Denver Foundation, created to support families raising children with special needs. For the world, Bob Denver will always be remembered as Gilligan, the lovable castaway. But for his children, he was Dad, sometimes private, sometimes protective, and always devoted. Dreama Perry Denver remains deeply committed to preserving Bob Denver's legacy and supporting families of children with special needs. In 2024, she published a book called Island to Icon, The Many Lives of Bob Denver, which mixes biography, scrapbook, and previously unseen photos. She explained, "I really wanted to commemorate the 60th anniversary. I went through every nook and cranny of my house, looking for anything that would be fun in the book. Photos of Bob's career from beginning to end, photos of Bob growing up, and pictures that have never been out there before." While compiling the book, Dreama discovered surprising artifacts, such as a holiday postcard addressed to Bob from Elvis Presley and his mother's scrapbook materials. She included these in the book, saying, "That had been in my possession for 35 years and I had no idea. That was a great find." Dreama also speaks warmly about Bob's humility and his enjoyment of a more ordinary life after the peak of fame. "When we would get out of the house, people would make a fuss over him, and it always took us by surprise because he was just Bob," she said. She added that Bob loved living in West Virginia, appreciating that he could go to places like Lowe's and be treated like a regular person. In recent years, Dreama has continued to appear in interviews and events to honor Bob's memory and the legacy of Gilligan's Island. She also hosts themed gatherings like Gilligan's Beach Party and participates in retrospectives tied to anniversaries of the classic show. On social media and in public appearances, Dreama promotes her projects while keeping the story of Bob and their family alive. In all, she keeps his legacy in the public mind, not by clinging to fame, but by honoring his humanity, storytelling, and devotion to family. Bob Denver's life was one of contrasts. To the world, he was Gilligan, the lovable castaway, and Maynard, the goofy beatnik. But at home, he was a devoted husband and father, a man whose greatest role was not on screen but within his family. His eldest children, Patrick, Megan, and Emily, each chose their own paths, some quietly, some briefly, in the arts, while his youngest son, Colin, shaped the second half of his life with lessons of patience, strength, and unconditional love. On September 2, 2005, Bob Denver passed away in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, at the age of 70, following complications from cancer treatment. In accordance with his wishes, he was laid to rest quickly and privately, far from the spotlight that had defined so much of his career. Today, his wife Dreama continues to honor his memory through her writing, her public appearances, and the Denver Foundation, which supports families of children with special needs. She often reminds fans that Bob was more than Gilligan. He was a storyteller, a partner, and a father. Bob Denver's legacy lives on in the laughter of reruns, in the hearts of his family, and in the quiet work of love and compassion he inspired. For millions, he remains a symbol of joy on the screen. For those who knew him best, he will always be remembered simply as Bob, and most importantly, as Dad. Bob Denver's story is one of laughter, love, and legacy. From the beaches of Gilligan's Island to the quiet moments with his family, his impact still lives on today. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more journeys into the lives of Hollywood's most unforgettable stars. What do you remember most about Bob Denver? His role as Gilligan, his work as Maynard, or his devotion as a father? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below.